Bar staff of Reddit, have you ever had a man use the Safeword drink escape, and how often does it happen? Story 1. One night at a bar with my fiance, I accidentally used the Safeword drink when ordering 2 Manhattans. To my surprise, the bartender pulled me aside and asked if I needed help, possibly thinking I was in a dangerous or uncomfortable situation. Although I found it funny that Manhattan was their safe word, it was reassuring to know that the bar staff was looking out for their patrons' safety. Story 2. I had a regular at my hotel who was married and very friendly. One week, we had a woman staying with us who had crazy eyes. I could tell my regular was uncomfortable and wanted to escape, so I called him back to my desk and asked him a question about Detroit, where I wasn't actually going. He was able to slip away and later called me to thank me for saving him from an awkward situation. Story 3. Years ago, I was at a bar and saw a young girl who had been there around the same time as me. Before long, she was so intoxicated that she passed out. It seemed suspicious to me, so I picked her up and alerted the bar staff. They acted quickly and called an ambulance. I carried her out, but her friends kept trying to get me to put her in their car. I stayed and waited for the ambulance to arrive, and I'm glad I did. Story 4. During my time working at a popular nightclub in the gay community, I witnessed all sorts of encounters. One evening, 2 guys were hitting it off and having a great time until one became too touchy-feely, making the other visibly uncomfortable. The uneasy part attempted to walk away, but the persistent one kept pulling him back. To signal his distress, the uncomfortable guy started shaking his head whenever a staff member walked by. After seeing this several times, we realized we had to intervene. We pulled the aggressive guy aside and explained that his advances were unwelcome and the other guy wanted to leave. That's when things took a turn for the worse. He lashed out at us, accusing us of not knowing what he wanted. Despite his aggressive behavior, we managed to call in security to escort him out of the bar, ensuring the other guy could enjoy his night with friends without fear of being followed or harassed. Story 5. As a former bartender for a gay bar, I had my share of wild nights. One particular evening, a group of guys caught my attention. They were having a blast until one of them discreetly ordered an angel shot. I knew what that meant, so I took him to the office for privacy. He confessed that his coworkers were taking him to a gay bar and things were getting out of hand with unwanted groping. I offered him a safe space in the back room and even tried to provide some food, but all he had was a handful of crumpled singles. When I returned to check on him, I found him unresponsive and heavily drugged. I immediately called the police and they rushed him to the hospital. I shut down the bar to review the security footage, and to my horror, we caught 2 of his so-called friends slipping something into his drink. Thankfully, the police arrived in time to arrest the culprits, but the other 2 had already left. It was a sobering reminder of how dangerous the world can be, even in a seemingly safe space. Story 6. At a party, me and my girlfriend were playing beer pong. While I was in the restroom, I gave her my drink. Unbeknownst to us, someone had slipped a drug into it. When I returned, I finished the rest of the drink and instantly felt more intoxicated than expected. We quickly realized that someone had intended to drug my girlfriend, but mistakenly used my drink instead. Thankfully, my roommate drove us to the hospital where they revealed the presence of GHB in my system. Needless to say, the night was a blur. Story 7. A regular guy went out on a Tinder date with a very attractive woman. Initially, she was quite pleasant, but after a few drinks, she started acting very rudely towards everyone. When the bouncer noticed this, he approached the guy to ask how it was going. The man confessed that he wanted to leave, but he felt obligated to stay because of her. The bouncer then made the decision to politely remove the woman from the club, telling her she was too intoxicated. Shortly after, the man met his current girlfriend of 3 years. Story 8. I had an interesting encounter at a club a few years ago when a girl came and sat next to me. It was a bit of an awkward situation since I had been talking to another girl who was quickly scared off by her presence. This girl then began to speak about anything. And a few minutes later, she suddenly asked me, "Oh, so I was sitting here and lost my grandmother's $50,000. Could you give it back to me?" I knew instantly that this was really off and replied, "Come with me," as I marched her straight to the bouncer. I then explained to him that this girl was claiming to have lost her money and was making me feel uncomfortable. Immediately, the bouncer and the girl began to argue with each other. It seemed like they had encountered each other before. She then stormed off, and the bouncer informed me that she was under the influence of drugs and was always causing trouble. Story 9. One time, I had the pleasure of being a part of the Ask for Angela scheme in action. There was a young gay guy who was on a really terrible date. It was a really uncomfortable situation to witness from the bar, so we found a way to discreetly smuggle him into the kitchen and out the side door while his date was in the bathroom. His date came back from the bathroom asking where the kid was, and I just had to say I didn't know. The date started to get aggressive with me, so my supervisor had to step in and throw the guy out by the collar. Story 10. I used to work in a bar in Orlando, and one Friday night it was fairly busy. There was a guy who was a regular on a date with a lady, and it was going well until he asked for 2 shots of tequila. That's when I knew something was up, and it was like he was sending me a message. Sure enough, a few moments later, my manager called a taxi for him and explained the situation to the woman. She was furious, insisting that the man should pay for the bill regardless of the circumstances. Story 11. I had one incredibly cringe-worthy date that will never be forgotten. I was a regular at the bar, so I was familiar with the bartenders, and my date was from a nearby town. When I first saw her, I noticed a few things that were different from her OkCupid profile. She had a tendency to ramble on and say strange things, like how she believed that when she died, she would Leviorsk up to God, and used words that had no place in the English language to describe the act of death. I had dated people of various faiths and beliefs, but never someone quite like this. The straw that broke the camel's back was when she took the tomato off her burger and chucked it on the floor, proclaiming that all vegetables taste like dirt. I asked the bartender, Chuck, to distract her, and it worked. I left a $100 bill and quickly made my exit. The bartenders were so appreciative of the $40 tip I gave them that night, and they've been taking good care of me ever since. It's safe to say that date was a disaster, and the tomato on the floor summed up her personality perfectly. Story 12. I was working as a busboy at a pizza bar one night when I noticed a female at a table being quite loud and abrasive. As I was clearing the table, I noticed the man at the table had knocked over his drink. He handed me a napkin and pretended to help, but something wasn't quite right. I heard someone from the kitchen call 911, and I told my manager. The waitress brought the man another drink and said, "Accidents happen, don't worry about it." The woman began to get worse, and we could hear her threatening to kill herself if her date tried to leave. After about 12 minutes, the police arrived, and the man was in tears. He ran to the bathroom as the police took her away. To our shock, she started taking her clothes off in order to avoid being escorted out. There we were in the middle of the dinner rush with a woman running around the table screaming about her boyfriend and throwing silverware at the cops. They eventually tackled her and put her in handcuffs, dragging her naked body out to the car. The poor man was in tears in the bathroom when I went to check on him. He told me that they had met on POF. Story 13. I had a strange encounter at a bar one night. After about 20 minutes of sitting alone and nursing a beer, I was approached by a woman who had been overserved. She kept talking to me, grabbing me, and insisting that we leave so she could F my brains out. Not knowing what to do, I got up and pretended that a stranger across the way was my best friend. She then made her way over and started touching me. Fortunately, the bartender came to my rescue. She pretended to be a friend of mine, claiming that I was a co-owner of the bar, and took me to the office. There, I was given free food, allowed to finish my beer, and given some to-go food. They were very kind and understanding of the situation, and I eventually left the bar unscathed. Although, I'll never forget the wild hairstyle and the strong smell of cigarette smoke that followed her.